There's a room beneath every grave. The first door didn't creak, it breathed. No one tells you that the ground breathes. You think it's just still dirt, still silence. But the first time you dig deep enough, past roots, past bones, past the soft cough of leaves turning to rot, you'll feel it. The inhale, the pull, the waiting. And if you're unlucky like me, you'll dig through more than earth. You'll open something that isn't supposed to open. You'll find the room beneath the grave, and it will be waiting for you. I wasn't always a grave digger. That came later, after the fire, after the silence, after I stopped trying to be remembered. The job came to me the way most quiet tragedies do, softly with no name. A letter arrived, no return address, no signature. Just 5 words written in black ink on yellowed paper. The ground remembers. Do you? And below that, a cemetery map, not one I recognized, but when I placed my finger on the circle drawn in red, I felt something under my skin move. Like a string pulling loose, I went, because some things are louder than reason, and some silences are too heavy to carry alone. The cemetery was tucked behind a chapel, long forgotten. No road signs, no path. Just fog, crows, and a smell like wet iron and violets. The sign hanging above the rusted gate read, St. Elias Rest. But the rest part? That was a lie. The headstones tilted like they were trying to speak. The names were carved deep, and some were scratched out. And in the center, under a crooked oak, was the grave marked with a stone that didn't match the others. Newer, clean, waiting. No name. Just the date. Tomorrow. I wasn't meant to dig it yet, but the wind told me otherwise. It whistled low, then rose into something close to a voice, and I listened. Because sometimes you don't need permission, just confirmation. I grabbed the shovel from the chapel shed and began. The dirt was too soft, like it had already been disturbed. Like the grave was unfinished, like something beneath was still breathing. And then I hit wood. Only it wasn't a coffin. It was a door, a trapdoor. No lock, no handle, just a small brass plaque. It read, This room is yours. My breath caught in my throat, not from fear, from recognition. I had seen this plaque before, in dreams I never told anyone about. In the lull between waking and sleep. In that space where memories you never lived still cling to your skin. And in those dreams, I always opened the door. Always descended, always forgot what I saw. But the door was here now, reading, breathing, and I had a choice. Opened it. The stairs were narrow and carved from stone that glistened like wet teeth. The air changed, thicker, colder. And as I stepped down, the earth didn't shake. It sighed. As if relieved I had finally come back. The room wasn't large. It was circular. Walls covered in mirrors, all cracked, but none of them showed me. Instead, each one showed a moment I never spoke of. My mother crying when she thought I couldn't hear. The letter I burned when I didn't want to believe. The night I whispered, I'm sorry to someone, already gone. This wasn't a grave. This was a memory chamber, and it knew me. In the center was a chair, rocking, empty. Until it wasn't. A figure sat down. Thin, wearing my face, but not my eyes. It looked at me and said, Every grave has a room. Every room has a truth. And this one is yours. I tried to run, but the staircase was gone. Only the door remained, shut tight above me. And in the room, the mirrors began to hum. Low, deep, like the sound of regret echoing through old wood. And then I saw it. In one of the mirrors, a grave, freshly dug, with a name now carved into the headstone. Mine. The figure stood and said nothing more. It walked to the wall, pressed its palm against the mirror with the grave, and vanished. And I was alone, except for the sound, that low, breathing sound. It wasn't from the walls. It was from beneath the floor, like something else had heard me come in, like something was waking. Like this room wasn't the only one. I dug my way out with my hands, crawling through roots and rot and years. The sun burned when I reached it. The world had shifted, but the cemetery was still there. Only now. The next grave had a marker, and that marker read, "Do not dig unless you remember who you are." And I didn't, but I was about to, because once you've entered one of the rooms, the others start calling, and some won't wait to be opened. The mirror, that refused to reflect me. Some mirrors are broken, others are blind, but the worst kind are the ones that look straight through you and see someone else. When I left the first room, I thought I had escaped, but I hadn't. I had only shifted the silence, moved the weight from the outside to the inside, buried it a little deeper, like everything else I didn't want to carry. But the ground never forgets that it waits, and when it's ready, it shows you who you've been pretending not to be. I stayed away from the cemetery for 2 days. I boarded up the chapel windows, slept on the wooden floor with my boots still on. Didn't eat, didn't dream that at least. I thought I didn't, but on the third night, something changed. Not outside, inside. I woke to find a piece of glass on my chest. Thin, curved, still wet with soil. And on its surface, etched in something too dark to be ink, were 3 words. Come see yourself. The shovel was already leaning against the chapel door. Not where I left it. Still clean. No rust. And beneath it, another map. But this one wasn't printed. It was drawn in charcoal, crude, smudged, and where the first grave had been circled. Now there were 5 more. I didn't choose. The ground chose for me, because when I stepped out, the wind pushed me toward the second grave, and my boots moved like they remembered the way. This one had no name, only a phrase, scratched into the stone. Forgot who I was. Not carved, scratched, by fingernail maybe, or desperation. And already, the soil was loose. Too loose. As if the ground had been turned over and over, not to bury something, but to keep it from surfacing. Didn't dig. I fell, like the ground gave way under me. Like it knew I had to see this next room whether I wanted to or not. The second room was colder. Tighter. And this time, there were no mirrors on the wall, only one, directly across from where I landed. Oval, tall, framed and tarnished. Silver, but when I stepped in front of it, I saw nothing. No reflection. No movement. Just darkness, like I was looking into an empty hallway that led nowhere. But the deeper I stared, the more I realized it wasn't empty. There was someone in there. Not behind me. Not beside me. Inside me. It stepped closer. Same height, same shape, but its face was blurred, like a memory I refused to sharpen. And then it spoke. You forgot me first. I backed away, hit the cold stone wall. The mirror didn't move, but the reflection grew sharper. And now I saw it clearly. It was me, but not me. The eyes were too still, the mouth too quiet, the kind of face someone wears when they've said goodbye too many times and don't remember how to say hello. You buried me, it said, the day you chose silence over truth. I tried to speak, but my voice caught like a splinter in my throat. The mirror pulsed. Once. Twice. And with the third breath, it shattered. Glass flew outward. None of it touched me, but one shard landed at my feet. On its face, written in reversed lettering like a tattoo seen through skin. You were never missing. You were erased. I picked up the shard and pressed it to my chest. It stung, but the blood wasn't red. It was black, thick, molasses like. And when it touched the stone floor, it hissed. The mirror's frame crumbled, fell inward, and behind it was another door, smaller than the first. Wood, this time, painted white, with handprints all over it, small, like a child's, and carved at the top. Only those who forgive themselves may enter. I didn't enter. I couldn't, because forgiveness requires memory. And mine was still missing. Climbed out the same way I came in, through collapse. The grave had sealed behind me, but something else had risen, A daisy. Black petals. White stem. Blooming from glass. Back in the chapel, I stared at the maps again. The circles pulsed under the lantern light. New ones forming, each one calling something. I thought I'd buried each one waiting to become a door. But I didn't rest. COULDN, single quotes T. Because when I closed my eyes that night, I didn't see dreams. I saw the mirror, still broken, still waiting, still whispering. You were never missing. You were erased. The room that remembers before you do. Some rooms don't need keys. They need grief. Because grief unlocks memories you never gave yourself permission to remember. And this next grave. It didn't wait for me to find it. It found me. The morning after. The mirror room, the wind stopped. Not slowed, stopped. The kind of stillness that makes your skin itch. Like something's holding its breath right next to your ear. The crows were gone. The trees were too still. Even the insects quieted. Only one thing moved. The chapel door. It swung open on its own. Creaked once, and on the floor, another shard. Of mirror, this one longer. On its face, written in faint gray lettering, "She remembers you." I didn't know who she was, but I knew where to go, because the third grave was open before. I even touched it. The inscription was unfinished. Here lies, but no name, only a trace of letters. Like someone had started to carve then. Changed their mind, or forgotten who they were burying. Inside the grave. No dirt. Only stone stairs. Leading straight down. And on the wall beside it. Scratched in with something jagged. Memory must be earned. I went down slowly. Each step colder than the last. The air here didn't smell like soil. It smelled like mothballs and perfume. Like a closet that hadn't been opened in years, but still remembered the people who once wore the clothes. The room was square this time. And in the center, a bed. Small, metal frame. Thin white sheet folded tight. It looked untouched. Except for the photograph lying on the pillow. I picked it up. It was me, barely 13, standing beside a girl with long dark braids. We were smiling, but I couldn't remember her name. Then I heard it. Not from the room. From inside me. A name, muffled, blurred, and with it, a sound, laughter, high, childlike. It echoed off the walls like it had been waiting decades to be heard. And from the corner, a light flickered on. Lamp. Dim yellow glow. And beneath it, a desk. With a notebook. Open. Waiting, I stepped closer. The pages weren't blank. They were filled with my handwriting, but not recent. Not adult. Childish. Crooked letters, misspellings, and page after page began the same way. Today, I remembered her again. Each entry was a memory I didn't know I had. Games, whispers, midnight talks. And then the last page, a different tone. They told me not to say her name anymore. They told me she wasn't real. But I know she was. I still have the braid. I looked down. And there, beside the desk, a box. Inside, a single braid. Black, tied in red ribbon. My hands shook. Because now, I did remember. Her name was Leah, and she had been my best friend. Until the day she vanished. No one believed me. When I said I saw her walk into the woods. No one listened when I screamed that the ground opened and took her. They called it trauma, said she must have run away, or worse. But I knew. The cemetery had claimed her. And now, her room remembered when I didn't. The bed creaked. The braid began to twitch. Then, rise. Slowly. Levitating like a snake. And the voice came again. But this time, not from memory. From the walls. "You forgot me." I turned. Leah stood there. Not a ghost. Not a girl. Something between, eyes hollow, but not angry, just forgotten. "You promised you wouldn't." I dropped the notebook, tried to speak. Couldn't. My voice belonged to an earlier version of myself, one I buried long ago, but she heard it anyway. "You buried the promise when they made you forget." "Me," she stepped forward, touched my chest, cold fingers. Hot memory. And suddenly, I remembered everything. The games. The whispers. The grave. Her grave. The one I helped dig, thinking it was pretend. The one we sealed. As a game, only I came back. She didn't. I dropped to my knees, tried to apologize, but Leah shook her head. You don't need to say sorry. You need to remember. She took the braid, laid it across the pillow, then walked to the desk, wrote a final line in the notebook. He remembered me. And with that, the room sighed. The light flickered. The door above reopened. She was gone, but not vanished. Released. Because the grave was no longer holding a secret. It was holding truth. When I climbed out, I wasn't the same. I had a name now. Leah. I had a memory. A vow. And on my palm, her ribbon. Red. Still warm. Still real. The wind returned at soft this time. And in it, a new whisper. Some rooms open only when the forgotten forgive. In the chapel, the fourth grave pulsed on the map. Waiting. But I didn't feel afraid anymore, because now I understood. Each grave wasn't death. It was a door, and every door leads to something that wants to be remembered, even if remembering hurts. The door that knew my voice. Some doors don't open with keys, or hands, or force. Some doors open only when they hear something they've been waiting for, and this one was waiting for my voice. It began the night after I remembered Leah. I didn't sleep. I didn't want to. Not because I was afraid, but because I was beginning to understand the cemetery wasn't haunted. I was not by ghosts, but by parts of myself I'd locked away. Moments I'd buried in rooms, beneath the grief, and now they were knocking back. The map had changed again. The ink no longer circled the graves. It bled. Thick black. Streaks ran from one grave to the next, like veins or roots. Like the rooms were not separate, but connected. At the center of them all, one dot pulsed. Not red this time, gold. And I knew, without knowing why, that this grave was different. Not about memory. Not about regret. This one was about truth. It took me longer to find. The path wound through thick trees and fog that didn't move. The silence was heavier here. Not empty, expectant. As though the earth was holding its breath. The grave was newer. Stone polished. No moss. But the name had been scratched away, not erased. Torn out. As if someone had tried to make sure it could never be spoken again. And under that space, a single word remained. Listen. I sat down in front of it. Waited. Nothing happened. Until I whispered, I'm here. The ground moved, not opened, moved. Shifted. Like the roots were adjusting to make room for me. And then the stone cracked. Split down the center. And beneath it, not stairs, a mouth. A circular hole lined with black wood, carved with symbols I couldn't read but somehow understood. They said, only what is spoken may be remembered. I leaned closer, and the hole breathed in, then whispered, speak. I didn't know what to say. So I said the first thing that rose from the ache in my chest. I lied. The air stilled. Then, keep going. So I did. I lied when I said I didn't miss him. I lied when I said it didn't hurt. I lied when I smiled at the funeral. The breath grew warmer. Closer. Keep going. And now, I couldn't stop. The words poured out like floodwater bursting through old wood. I hated him for leaving. I hated myself for not holding on. I hated how quiet the house became after the laughter died. I hated the echo of his name when I screamed it into a room with no reply. And then, my voice cracked. I still talked to him. Silence. Heavy. Then the voice replied. Not from below. But from inside the door. Then let him answer. The floor opened. Not downward, outward. Like a hallway expanding. Walls lined in deep red cloth. The kind used in old theaters. And at the end, a small room. Single chair. Single candle. Single recorder. The kind my brother used to carry. And on the floor, his boots, untouched. still muddy from the night he vanished. I sat down, pressed play, and heard my own voice. Why'd you leave me? Why didn't you say goodbye? Was I not worth staying for? Then his voice crackled, distant, but his, you never asked me to stay. I sobbed, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. He left thinking I didn't care, because I never said the words. I waited too long, waited for him to read my silence like a page, and by the time I spoke, the room was already empty. I stood, faced the wall, carved my truth into it with shaking hands and broken fingernails. I needed you. Then the candle blew out, and in the dark, his hand on my shoulder, not cold, not ghostly. Remembered. When I emerged, the wind was louder, not chaotic, celebratory. Like the trees themselves were exhaling, like something had been released. And in my pocket, the recorder. Still warm, still playing my voice, on loop, but with one last message added at the end. Speak more. There are others still listening. I returned to the chapel. The maps were gone, but the graves were not. And when I looked outside, new markers had risen. One said, speak to be seen. Another, truth is a door you must knock on from the inside. And then the whisper again, from beneath the floorboards this time. Not all rooms have mirrors. Some are echoes. And echoes need voices to come alive. The grave that refused to stay buried. Some graves don't wait to be visited. They rise, they claw through the earth, not to be found, but to find you. And when they do, they don't ask for flowers. They ask for the pieces you swore you'd never dig up again. It started with a sound, not thunder, not wind, not the creak of wood or whisper of leaves. It was the unmistakable sound of earth moving itself. The ground outside, the chapel pulsed, not like something was digging down, but like something was pushing up. And in the middle of the night, where there had been only grass and fog, there was a new mound. Fresh. Wet. And on top of it, a wooden plank nailed into the soil. No name, no symbol, just a phrase burned into the wood. I never agreed to stay buried. I didn't need the map anymore. The cemetery had stopped hiding. It wanted to be seen now, not to haunt me, but to summon me. And this grave, this one felt personal. Like it belonged not to a stranger, not even to someone I lost, but to the version of myself I tried to kill. Approached slowly. The ground wasn't cold. It was warm, like it had been breathing. And the moment I touched the wooden plank, it snapped in half. The soil cracked. And then a voice from underneath. Familiar. Too familiar. You left me down here. Now you're coming with me. The ground gave way, and I didn't fall. I was pulled. This room didn't look like the others. There were no walls, no stone, no candles, no desk, only a mirror, but not upright. It was laid flat on the ground. A pool of a silver. Still. Until I stepped forward. Then it moved. Rippled. And inside it, I saw the night I tried to end it all. I was 17. The orphanage long behind me. Chapel still just a story whispered by elders, but the ache, the silence, the invisible weight that had never left. And one night, I sat in the woods. Pills in one pocket, a note in the other. But before I could finish, a sound, not from this forest. From inside me, a voice, small, wounded, begging, don't erase me. I didn't go through with it, but I buried the part that cried, the part that needed, the part that felt too much. I buried it deep. So deep, I thought it could never claw its way back. But now, it had, and it wore my face from the silver pool, a figure. Rose. Wet, trembling, eyes red from 1,000 unshed tears. He didn't speak. He just stared. And then held out his hand. In it, the note I never sent, torn, crumpled, but still legible. And across the middle, my handwriting. I don't know who I am without this pain. He held it close to his chest. Then whispered, then stop making pain your name. I broke, not into pieces, into truth. because I had been carrying that night like a coffin inside my ribs, pretending I hadn't heard the voice, pretending I had healed. But healing doesn't happen when you hide the body. It happens when you exhume it, when you cradle it in your arms and whisper, "I'm sorry I left you behind." The figure stepped closer. And for the first time in any of the rooms, he smiled, not with lips. With forgiveness. He didn't vanish. He stepped inside. On me. Not to haunt, but to rejoin. To take back the space I'd denied him. And when he did, the pool of silver dried, not cracked, not broken. Just complete, like a wound that finally stopped bleeding. I woke outside the grave, the plank gone. In its place, a mirror shard. Clean, smooth. And etched into it, "You are not what you survived. You are who kept walking." The fog was gone again. The wind had stilled. And on the hill behind the chapel, I saw a new light. Not fire, not lamp, a soft, white glow. Not calling. Inviting. Because now, the cemetery wasn't testing me. It was guiding me toward the final rooms, the deepest doors, the ones that don't just hold memory, they hold meaning. The chapel below the chapel. Some sanctuaries are built above secrets. Some altars stand atop bones that were never meant to rest. And some chapels aren't places of prayer. They're places of containment. And the one I stood in, it was never meant to be holy. It was meant to be locked. I noticed the change in the wood first. The floorboards beneath the altar weren't like the rest. They were older, thicker, darker. And when I stepped on them, they didn't creak. They resisted, like they were warning me, or worse, begging me to leave. The wind outside had stopped again, but not like before. The silence wasn't heavy. It was guarded. Like everything around me, trees, shadows, even time itself, was holding its breath. Knelt by the altar. Not to pray. To listen. And deep below, through layers of old stone and time-rotted timber, I heard it, a heartbeat, but not mine. Not human. Not alive. Yet aware. I peeled back the old rug beneath the altar. It wasn't dusty. It wasn't aged. That was clean. Too clean. And beneath it, a hatch. Iron, circular, carved with a single symbol I never seen before, but somehow knew. It meant, "Do not open unless you're ready to end the lie." I hesitated. Then whispered, "I'm not afraid anymore." The hatch opened on its own. The air that rushed up wasn't stale. It was ancient. It carried a weight, a presence, the kind that doesn't rush toward you. It waits. Because it knows you'll come. Eventually. Because this wasn't just another room. It was the source. The descent was longer than any other. Stone steps led deep into the earth, spiraling tighter with every turn. There were no torches. No lights, yet I could see. Not with my eyes, with remembrance. Because this place, I had dreamed it once. As a child, over and over. The chapel on the hill, the hatch beneath the altar, the door made of bone and breath. I thought it was nightmare. It was invitation. At the bottom, I reached the door. It was not locked. Had never been. Because what lies behind it isn't dangerous by force. It's dangerous by truth. And the truth is, this room remembers what you never told anyone. Not because you couldn't, but because you didn't know how. Inside, there were no graves. No candles, no echoes, only pews. Dozens of them. All facing an altar, and sitting in every seat were versions of me. Young, old, angry, silent, terrified, hopeful. Every age I'd ever been. Every version I'd pretended never existed. And they all turned when I entered. In unison. Silent. Watching. Waiting. I walked the aisle. And at the front, on the altar, there was no cross. No symbol, only a mirror, tall, dustless, sharp. But it didn't reflect the chapel. It reflected a house I barely remembered. And inside it, my mother. She wasn't dead. At least, not in memory. But I had buried her anyway, because sometimes the most painful graves aren't for people who died. They're for people who left while living. and she left me long before she was gone, with her absence, her silence, her shame that became my inheritance. The mirror didn't speak. It felt, and in that reflection, I saw it, the day she turned away, the moment she didn't protect me, the second she chose him instead of me. And how I smiled anyway, because children don't stop loving, even when they're unloved. They just start burying themselves. I fell to my knees, not in pain. In recognition, because for the first time, I saw it wasn't her I had buried. It was me. The boy who waited at the window. Who pretended every car was hers, who folded drawings and placed them under pillows she never returned to. I had entombed him, but he never stopped looking for the light. Under the door, one of the versions in the pews stood, walked toward me. It was him. Boy. He held out a paper, a crumpled sketch, stick figures, a house, a heart. And beneath it, come home. I took the paper. Held him. And he vanished. Not erased. Reclaimed. And every other version of me in the chapel began to smile, one by one. As if they'd all been waiting for that moment of permission. The mirror cracked. Not shattered. Just one clean line down the center. Because now, the reflection wasn't one life. It was all of them, stacked, layered, integrated. And in the glass, I saw myself whole, not healed. But held. By memory, by truth, by all I used to be. I left the chapel below, the chapel in silence, not the silence of fear, the silence of completion. The wind returned, the trees whispered. And above me, the cemetery waited, but not as before. Not with graves. With doors, and behind each, a voice I was finally ready to hear. The key that was never lost. Some keys don't fit locks. They fit memories. They open doors not made of wood or steel, but of silence and scars and things we told ourselves we were over. And sometimes, a key doesn't come when you need it. It was always with you. You just forgot how to feel its weight. I found mine in a dream. At least, I thought it was a dream, because when I awoke, my hand was closed in a fist, and inside it, something cold. Small. Familiar. I opened my palm. There it was. A key. Simple. Iron. Worn with time, but tied to it was a red string. And that string wove its way through my fingers like a lifeline I hadn't known I'd been holding onto since childhood. I didn't know what it opened, but my body did, because it began to move before I asked it to. Out of the chapel, through the overgrown garden, past the graves I'd already entered, and toward the only door I had never dared touch, the one behind the stone angel. The statue was cracked now. No longer pristine, its eyes, once cold and blind, now bled with moss. And at its feet, a keyhole. Not in the statue. In the ground. The earth shifted when I knelt. Not away, but toward me. As if welcoming what had always been mine. I inserted the key. Turned. The soil opened like water. And beneath it, not stairs, not a tunnel, but a single wooden box. I pulled it out, light as bone, small as a secret. I sat beside it and slowly unlatched the clasp. Inside, letters, dozens of them. All addressed to me, none opened. I picked the first, recognized the handwriting. Leah. I read, "You never needed to be strong for me. I would have loved you broken. I already did." Tears came instantly, not because of what was written, but because I remembered writing back and never sending it. I read the next. My brother, you were always enough. I left because I didn't know how to tell you I was breaking too. Then another. My mother, you deserved more than I gave. But I gave you all I had. I just wish I had more. Each letter opened a door inside me I didn't know was still shut. And behind every door was a version of me, sitting silently, waiting to be seen. At the bottom of the box, I found one last envelope. No name. No return address. Just one line across the front. From you, to you. I opened it. Inside, a single sentence. You never lost the key. You were just afraid of what it opened. I exhaled, a sound I hadn't made in years. Not just breath. Relief. because now I understood. The key had never been to a place, that it had been to a permission, to feel. To break, to be more than the mask of survival. When I looked up, the cemetery had changed again. Not in shape, in presence. It no longer felt like a collection of graves. It felt like a library. Each plot a story, each name a question, each door an answer I hadn't known I needed. I placed the box back into the earth. Not to hide it, to root it, like a seed, because that's what grief is. Sometimes, a seed that waits for us to become strong enough to plant it, not in sorrow, but in remembrance. As I stood, the angel's face shifted. It no longer looked mournful. It looked free. And in the wind, I heard a whisper, not a ghost, not a voice, just a truth that lives inside all endings. You don't return to yourself. You remember you never left. The day the graves stopped whispering, the graves had always whispered. From the moment I first stepped into the chapel, they had murmured in wind, in wood, in water under the soil. They spoke in memories not mine. In griefs I'd never named. And I listened, because I thought that was the price of walking among the dead. But what I didn't know was that one day they would stop, and silence would cost more. It began at sunrise, the first one I'd seen since arriving, not because the sun hadn't risen before, but because I hadn't been able to look up. Something in me had always kept my eyes low, burdened by names on stones, by echoes in the ground. But now, the light reached me. Not blinding, not warm. Just honest. In that morning, every grave was still. No breathing, no whispers, no pulsing wind. Just stillness. It wasn't peace. It was expectation. Like everything was holding itself back, waiting. I wandered the rows, graves I had opened, rooms I had survived, lessons carved in bone and breath, and I found myself returning to the oldest one, the first I'd entered, Leah's, only now. The stone bore two names, hers and mine. Same dates, same epitaph. We were never buried. Just waiting. I dropped to my knees, because now I understood. The rooms weren't built by the dead. They were built by me. Each one, a memory I couldn't carry. A secret I didn't survive fully. A truth I exiled to darkness because it didn't fit the mask of who I needed to be. But they waited. All of them. In vengeance. In love. And in the silence that morning, I heard the one voice I'd forgotten I missed. My own. Not the voice I used for others. The voice I spoke in when I was alone. The child's tone. The cracked teenage prayer. The adult's whispered truth before sleep. And it said, "You're not the grave. You're the soil. What you buried made you fertile." I cried then, not in sadness. In return, because it wasn't the silence that hurt. It was realizing how long I'd lived without it. Without stillness. Without self. Without presence that wasn't performative. The wind rose again, but it didn't carry whispers. It carried closure. Pages turning, not slammed shut. But finished. And in the center of the cemetery, a light opened, not fire. Not torch. A door, wooden, old. And painted across the top in white chalk. Here ends the rooms. Here begins the home. I stood, walked. Each step less burdened. Not because I had no pain left, but because I finally owned it. All of it was not healed, but I was whole. The door didn't creak. It opened like a breath. And inside, not a room, a field. Wide. Open. No walls. No graves. Just wind and wheat. And the soft hum of something I hadn't heard since I was a child. Hope. As I crossed the threshold, the earth behind me didn't vanish. It stayed. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means planting memory into a place where it can grow, not haunt. And when I looked back one last time, the graves had no names. No sorrow, only flowers. Dozens. Wild. Bright. As if the past had bloomed. Now that I had stopped burying it, the final door never closes. Not all doors are meant to shut. Some stay open, not to let others in, but to remind us that we are allowed to leave, to return, to revisit, to remember. And sometimes, that's the most terrifying kind of freedom, the kind that no longer traps you, but waits for you. The field was silent, not empty, but full of everything I thought I'd lost. Every voice that had once whispered from beneath the soil now sang in the wind. Not in grief. In recognition. I was not walking into a new place. I was walking back to one I had built with every memory I'd buried, now unearthed. And understood. Ahead stood one last figure, dressed in black, wide hat, gloved hands, eyes that held every age I had ever been. He didn't speak. He simply raised his hand and pointed to the horizon. A line of wooden gates, thousands of them, each identical, each humming softly, each open. I approached the nearest one. There was no lock. No test, only a mirror carved into its wood. And in it, my face, not the face I showed the world. Not the face I practiced, the real one, the one with scars. With kindness I'd been afraid to show. With exhaustion I never let anyone see. And as I stepped through, the door did not vanish. It followed me. I found myself back in the chapel, only now. It wasn't broken. The wood was polished. The windows whole. The altar was warm. And outside, the cemetery no longer pulsed with mourning. It glowed. Softly. Like a home lit by candles waiting for someone to return. There was one final grave. No name, no dates, only this. The self you buried, the self that waited, the self that forgives. I knelt. Not in grief. In thankfulness, because everything I had faced, every room. Every whisper. Every door had never asked me to be strong, only to be present. I pressed my hand to the soil, felt nothing. And yet everything. And from the corner of the grave, a single flower bloomed. Dark blue. Sharp edge. Unfamiliar. Yet somehow I knew its name. Closure. I left the graveyard that day, not as a keeper, but as someone kept, held. Not by death. By memory. And the moment I stepped beyond the gates, the chapel rang. Not a bell, a voice. Mine. Soft. Alive. Whole. Back in the world. People asked me why I stayed so long, what I found, what I feared, what I buried. Only ever gave one answer. I went to dig graves, but I found the rooms I left myself in, and one by one, I brought me back. Some doors never close, because healing isn't a sealed wound. It's a room with an open window. Where light enters freely, and every version of you, even the quietest, can finally breathe.